Hello. Okay, so today we're talking about the ISFP personality. So this is going to be kind of like a comprehensive video about the ISFP, starting from the cognitive functions and what their strengths are and what their growth points are, and basically what ISFPs bring to the world and how they can do more of that. The first thing we should start off by talking about is how the code works. So basically, the letters ISFP are actually kind of a code. So cognitive functions came first, and then Myers-Briggs, that came next. So the middle two letters are really the two important letters. So the second letter, S, is how you take in information. It's how you learn. It's called your perceiving letter. So their second letter is their perceiving letter, that's S. And then their third letter, F, is their judging letter. It's how they make judgments. It's how they make decisions. So the letters on the outside, I and P, are kind of like a code. If you're a P, it means you show the world, you extrovert your perceiving function. So for ISFPs, that means they extrovert their sensing function. They extrovert their second letter. So that's abbreviated SE, extroverted sensing. And then that just automatically means that they introvert their judging letter. So that's a little I, introverted feeling. And then since they're an introvert, they dominantly prioritize the introverted one. So their first cognitive function is introverted feeling, and their second cognitive function is extroverted sensing. But everyone does have 4 cognitive functions. So their second cognitive function drops down, extroverted sensing drops down to its direct opposite. So the opposite of sensing is intuition, the opposite of extrovert is introverted. So their third function is introverted intuition. And then finally, their fourth letter is the direct opposite of their first cognitive function. So the opposite of introverted is extroverted. The opposite of feeling is thinking. So their final function is extroverted thinking. So I know it's kind of a lot. I do have a playlist. It's Myers-Briggs from start to finish. I'll link it up above. And it starts at the very beginning. So like if you're at the level where all you know is the difference between extrovert and introvert, I start at the beginning and kind of work their way down. And then maybe after you've kind of like watched that playlist, this video is completely tailored to the ISFP, whereas that playlist is just kind of general and could kind of apply to any personality. So their first function is introverted feeling. And whatever your first function is, that is always going to end up being like your dominant strength. It's the water you swim in. It's who you feel like you are. So in the case of the ISFP, introverted feeling is all about how they on the inside feel about things. It's their convictions, their beliefs, their ideals, their identity. Do they feel like there's like a congruency between their actions and their beliefs? Is there kind of like inner harmony? And they kind of understand that there are good parts of them and there are bad parts of them, and there are different parts inside of you that all have these different beliefs, and kind of their goal is to get those all singing in unison, to be a very authentic person, to be a caring person. A lot of people who lead with introverted feelings, the ISFPs and the INFPs, really would describe themselves as artists, even if they're not kind of like an artist by profession. Also kind of like, this is kind of like a caricature. Like what I like to do is sometimes talk about like the caricatures sort of what these types show up. A lot of types that lead with introverted feeling give me kind of like a hippie vibe. These like California beach people that have their dream catchers and they got feathers in their hair. But so I do really associate the ISFP with being kind of like a surfer dude, because they are with their second function still in their body. Introverted feeling makes them pretty quiet and really kind. They're really kind people to be around, and it sometimes can make them kind of judge themselves harshly. They're kind of 24/7 judging, is this action moral? Was that moral? Was that moral? Was that moral? And they're constantly thinking and looking at the world through the lens of their inner convictions and their beliefs. And it's not so much of like judging other people in a harsh way, even though sometimes they can judge themselves pretty harshly, but it's more like putting themselves in other people's shoes and saying, if I had done that action, would that be moral? And they're kind of just always analyzing things through that lens. So their second function is extroverted sensing, and extroverted sensing makes them very playful. It gives them a lot of energy. It really makes them be in their body. It's all about taking in extroverted senses. So when they're in a room taking in information, the information that they're taking in is the sensory information. It becomes really playful. I associate extroverted sensors with like kind of SpongeBob slapstick humor, a very playful bodily type humor. With an ISFP, when they couple introverted feeling with extroverted sensing, they become amazing musicians. My husband's an ISFP, and he plays basically every instrument, and he does it to a really high ability, and he's a musician as his career, and it's really cool to watch him. If you ever watch ISFP musicians, they are just in flow. It doesn't have to be music, but it could be, it could be painting or some other art form. Maybe it's not directly like an obvious art form, but the way they do it is in a really artful way. I knew one ISFP who painted murals all across his like dining room and kitchen, and all of the murals had like a really specific meaning to him, and he portrayed it through his art. And he was like a craftsman, like he would make custom tables, but he really put a lot of emphasis into the carving and really beautifying them. There's really like beautifying sense. I'm not sure if Ariana Grande is an ISFP, but I kind of get the sense that she is, because she's kind of just like quiet and sweet, and you can kind of tell that everything she does is done with beautiful sensory detail. I just saw a video where she's doing the harmonies to the song Positions. I recommend watching that video, because she's like, okay, let's do this one. She's like, okay, let's do it again. Does another harmony. She's like, okay, I want to layer it. Let's do another one. And she just keeps layering it and getting it on the first try. I mean, when ISFPs really tune their extroverted sensing, they are amazing in the sensory world and kind of bringing their artistic nature out into the world. Their third function is introverted intuition, and the third function for every personality is kind of the point where you get tripped up. Maybe if you're having a bad month, you're kind of sitting in this function, or so a lot of times I notice when people are in arguments, they get into this function. For ISFPs, as well as ISTPs, they both have this function in this spot. I notice that it tends to make them hesitant to act. Sometimes it can make them fearful of their environment. I've seen ISFPs and ISTPs that when they're kind of unhealthy, they actually get scared of sensory things, which is kind of unexpected, like maybe scared of the water or scared of heights, or just not really sure if they want to take the leap, because introverted intuition is basically the exact opposite of being in your body. It's kind of analyzing the future and kind of it's running simulations. Okay, this could happen, this could happen. It's all trying to converge to find the one best path. And so when it's used as a strength, it really helps you make good decisions and follow a good path throughout your life. But when it's third down, it can just make them pretty fearful, and it can just make them see all of the things that could go wrong. Instead of being optimistic about the future, it can be kind of pessimistic and kind of scared about the future, specifically as it applies to sensory things. I've noticed that in arguments, since this is kind of the opposite about being in your body, it tends to come off as being very dissociative. So dissociating from their body, being kind of paralyzed, being very mute. It makes them very, very quiet. And when they get in this function, it's really the opposite of what you would suspect their strengths to come out as. They would stop playing music, really stop bringing their ideas out into the world, and they would start just kind of holding it a little closer to the vest. To the outer world, you just stop seeing the beauty of them. They kind of trap it all inside, hunker down like a hermit. It's really a self-defense mechanism. And then finally, the last function, extroverted thinking. So extroverted thinking is all about what other people, kind of like extroverted, what other people think about things. What has society decided is the best way to do things? It can be a lot about setting goals. Society says it's good to set goals. It's good to execute and to act on things in this efficient way. This is the best way to do something. It can be a lot about improvement, getting better about things, putting in the hard work till you finally get to your end goal. I always see the fourth function as being something that it does a few things. One, it kind of whispers at your aspirations, like your aspirational self, this is where I want to be. But it's really hard to get there because a lot of the times the fourth function is basically just completely turned off. 95% of the time, that fourth function's turned off. You kind of like don't know what to do with it or how to approach it. But it does whisper at your lifelong dreams that you have, or these big aspirations that you have. So I've noticed for like ISFPs, a lot of times they'll have big goals. Like maybe they want to be a big famous musician, for example. They have this aspiration. They want to be seen in the eyes of a bunch of people. It's their big aspiration. They have a hard time understanding what's step one to get there. Or, oh, I have to put in all this hard work and I have to grind consistently for years for this to maybe pay out. So I think sometimes, especially when they're unhealthy, they just kind of feel like everyone's unique. We all deserve a free pass. Why should I have to work hard and prove myself? Everyone should just know that we're all, brilliantly unique, and I'm no exception. So everyone should just, recognize that right off the bat without me having to really grind and put any hard work in. And that can be a really big tripping point, because when you have a really big aspiration that you want to have this big career and you're not willing to take the steps to get there, the not fun steps to get there, that leads to a lot of disappointment. The distance between your expectations and reality is very far away. And I've noticed that sometimes ISFPs have a hard time setting realistic goals. Sometimes I've noticed they tend to set goals that are much higher than other personality types would set. And then at the same time, if they're unhealthy, they don't actually put in the steps to get there. So in general, when you put all these together, the vibe I get from ISFPs are just not always the starving artist type, like I mentioned Ariana Grande, but I get like the starving artist vibe, the kind of surfer hippie, the person who's a vegan because it's kind of authentic and aligns with their moral values, and at the same time it's good for their body. And so I've noticed a lot of ISFPs tend to be vegan, vegetarian, something of that sort. They're really just trying to do what's authentic. A lot of ISFPs really love animals. They're really good with little kids. I think SE users in general are really good with little kids because it's pretty playful. But then when they have FI that makes them so kind and caring about everyone, it really makes a good combo for being good with kids. They're the kind of people that will like walk around barefoot because they heard that it's better for your feet to walk around barefoot. It just seems kind of authentic to be like one-on-one with the land. Really into yoga. I've seen so many ISFPs that are into yoga. That's another blend of introverted feeling and extroverted sensing coming together. So now let's get into the point where we talk about what the ISFP's hang up is and maybe a couple growth points for how they can overcome that. In my opinion, introversion and extroversion are both needs. Just in the same way that, I've said this example before, but in the same way that food and water are both needs. You probably have a preference for one or the other. Like maybe you like food more than you like water. But at the end of the day, you need both. So you have a preference for one, however, you need both. And that's how I see introversion and extroversion. Maybe you get more out of one, maybe you get more out of introversion, maybe you feel a little bit recharged. But what introversion does for people is it brings them a depth. They get aligned, in the case of the ISFP, they get aligned with their values, they get in touch with themselves. What do I want? What do I think is authentic? What message do I want to spread to the world? And you get some clarity. Introversion will give you a depth and a clarity, whereas extroversion will allow you to spread that message. So in the case of the ISFP, extroverted sensing will get them into their body, on the musical instrument, or the canvas, or the paintbrush, or whatever it might be, and that will then be broadcasted. So you have the introverted function, which will give input, some meaningful input, and then the extroverted function provides output, and it gives you impact in the world. What use would all this depth be if you never shared it with anyone or never impacted other people? On the other hand, what good is it to impact a bunch of people if it's not going to be a good impact, if you're just going to like shotgun all this, useless and in some cases harmful things? So introversion and extroversion, both needs. They both give valuable things. And when I look at very successful people, there are people that have mastered both of these. They got clear on what they wanted to output, and then they outputted it. So for ISFPs, if they get stuck in introversion too much, so if they're in introverted feeling and introverted intuition, that's called a loop. And that really will cause them to be too introverted. All the introverted types tend to get too introverted when they're unhealthy. And the reason is that if you're an introvert, you get energy from being introverted. And it's out of your comfort zone to be extroverted. I think it's ultimately in your best interest, but it is going to expend energy. It is going to be out of your comfort zone. It's not going to necessarily recharge you. So when you're unhealthy and you're just trying to survive, you're not going to go above and beyond. You know what I mean? Like if you're just trying to survive, you're not trying to push the bounds of your comfort zone. You're just trying to like hunker down, be safe, get through whatever you need to get through, conserve energy. So we all go through times like that. But the important thing is to realize and to hopefully not be in that state for years. Some people can be in loops for 5 minutes. Some people can be in loops for 40 years. And that can really be a problem and really be damaging if you get too introverted or too extroverted one side or the other. So for ISFPs, if they get too much in introverted feeling and introverted intuition, it really just paralyzes them and it makes them very fearful. They kind of lose a sense of bravery. They lose a sense of who they are. ISFPs come alive when they're in their body. And that's when you can really tell that they're using the most of who they are. It can make them holier than thou, actually. Introverted feeling with introverted intuition really makes them feel like, I know everything and you know nothing. You can be kind of stubborn, very stubborn in its beliefs, and not taking in new information. That's part of the benefit to when you extrovert. When you extrovert and go out there, you get all sorts of new information. Some of the information you don't like, some of it you do like, but if you're around people or books or whatever it may be, you get new information, and then that allows you to become a little bit more of a wiser person. Whereas if you spend all your time introverting, you don't get a variety of information. When you're alone, you get to choose the type of information that you want, and you go down one path and you get this information, and that can lead to confirmation bias. Anyways, it basically will just make you a little bit less wise when you're getting such a narrow scope of information. So what ISFPs need to do is they need to combat that tendency to be too introverted and hunker down and protect themselves with a little bit of extroversion. So they have two extroverted functions that they can pull from. The best one that they can pull from is extroverted sensing. That is what's going to actually make them a wonderful musician or an artist. You actually have to get there and be in your body and be doing that. It also will make them a lot more productive. Extroverted sensing can make someone, really get things done. Extroverted sensing has a lot of energy. It's in its body. If it has a chore to do, it'll just immediately do it. And it doesn't really think too much about it. It makes quick decisions. And that really can help the ISFP actualize their dreams. Now, the second extroverted function that they have, like I said, the fourth function has a tendency to just be completely turned off. So at the normal resting state, if people are not working on their personality, I bet they're using their fourth function ballpark 5% of the time. That's just a ballpark. I'm not married to that number, but it's just ballpark 5%. I believe that people should integrate that function a little bit more. I don't think they should start using it 100% of the time, but maybe if your tendency is to use it 1 to 2% of the time, try to bump it up and maybe get it to 10%. It's by no means going to be a strength, but integrate it a little bit more, because like I said with the ISFP, expectations and reality have a big jump. And when you can work on extroverted thinking, you can set goals for this. So for example, my husband's an ISFP, and for him, one way that he started working on extroverted thinking was yearly planning, monthly planning, weekly planning, daily planning. And it just helped make sure that his FI ideals aligned with what the day-to-day grind was looking like. And extroverted sensing gets you into the day-to-day, you're working on day-to-day, and TE makes sure that you're working on your goals chunk by chunk by chunk. It's just crushing for an ISFP, any of the IFPs, if you have these big goals and then over time you're not making progress to them, so you have to sell out. And that just hurts my heart when I see IFPs sell out and eventually give up their dreams. And I don't think that they need to give up their dreams. I think that they just need to start taking the little actions to get there, and to be okay, have some patience that, it's going to take a while. And so I think that if you can use extroverted thinking and extroverted sensing to help you reach your goals, then you actually become that artist that you want to be, or whatever, whatever dream that you may have. I want ISFPs to actually go out there and accomplish it, because when ISFPs are in their zone, they bring us so much magical, deep felt art that I really appreciate. And in my opinion, a lot of the stereotype from the starving artist comes from a lot of artists just being ISFPs and not getting into extroverted sensing or extroverted thinking. And I think there are tons of artists that have made it. And when you hear about those artists, most of the time they worked for 10 years and then they got lucky and someone discovered them. So I feel like the difference between extroverted thinking and introverted feeling is kind of creating your own luck. You have to use extroverted thinking and extroverted sensing to create. It's not going to work for a while, and eventually you just get lucky because you created your own luck. And I feel like that's the big message for ISFPs to learn, is that you have to do things that you don't like. And I think IFPs have a hard time wanting to do things that they don't like, or understanding the extroverted thinking idea that sometimes there's a means to an end. You might have to do this means for 10 years so that you can have a life that you love for 70 years. I mean, it's a trade-off, and you're kind of trading back and forth. I believe that it's worth it, as opposed to pining for something that never comes, and then you're disappointed and feel the shame of your expectations not aligning up with reality and having to deal with, everyone told me that it wasn't going to work and they were right. And I don't want that. I don't want that to happen, because ISFPs have a really beautiful thing to bring to the world. So I think some tangible things is just getting in your body more. I think sometimes ISFPs have a tendency to be in extroverted sensing in maybe a few areas of their life. So maybe they're like, oh, yep, I'm in extroverted sensing because I'm a musician. But then that's literally the only place that they use it in. So I think it'd be good for ISFPs to maybe get into music, get into sports. Part of extroverted sensing is acting quickly. So if you have a to-do item or you have a chore, Don't think about it too much. As soon as you start thinking about it too much, that's a problem. Just react, get it done. Try to keep your mind clear. If you get a text, just respond to it right away. Yeah, so I think anything that gets you into your body, yoga, and just try to think about lots of different areas of your life and try to incorporate extroverted sensing in many areas of your life, not just one. And then I would say the same with extroverted thinking, not quite to the level of extroverted sensing. I think if an ISFP is doing well, they would approximately be in introverted feeling 70% of the time, extroverted sensing 60% of the time, introverted intuition like 5% of the time, and extroverted thinking maybe 10% of the time. It's not going to add up to 100 because you could be using multiple functions at once. But yeah, so for extroverted thinking, you should integrate it just a little bit more than you can actually work on achieving the goals that you have. It's very goal oriented, but you don't need to be doing it all the time. Like you don't need to be like a TJ working in some office job if that's not what you want, working your way up the ladder. That's a very TJ thing to do. So you don't need to become an extroverted thinker, a TJ by any means, but just integrate it and use it to help you achieve your goals. Don't just pick up some like TJ extroverted thinking type goals. So I think if you work on this, you will accomplish your goals and it'll give you a sense of bravery. SE will really give you a sense of bravery. TE will help you actually accomplish your goals. And what that does, it's all in service of bringing that artist to life. It's not to abandon the artist at all. It's like quite contrary. You work on extroverted thinking and extroverted sensing to really amplify the sense of being an artist. I think sometimes people will double down on, I'm just going to work on introverted feeling and that's it. But that is a very diminishing effect. Whereas you could use your two extroverted functions to amplify who you already are. It's not going to water down who you are, but it just amplifies and gives more of a voice, more of a lift to who you already are. So yeah, if I were you, I would maybe just go on YouTube, watch some videos about extroverted sensing, see how you can integrate that in many areas of your life, in your finances, in your health, in your hobbies, in your marriage, whatever. In many areas of your life, see how you can integrate extroverted sensing in all the areas of your life. See if you can utilize hints of extroverted thinking. See if you can boost that a little bit through maybe just like grinding through things you don't want to do temporarily so that you can ultimately get to things that you do want to do. So yeah, that's the ISFP. Thanks so much for watching. I love ISFPs. My husband's an ISFP, so I have kind of a special place in my heart for ISFPs. One of my favorite types for sure. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.